Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. So today, it's a new CGC 9.8 cold list. Yeah, I got some great 9.8 comic books for fair prices to talk about. And certainly the hot comic books are usually really expensive. So the cold ones are definitely going to be more affordable for what you get. So yeah, let's have a look here. I got a full list of 10 cold CGC 9.8 comics to get through. First one up, it's a Giant Size Chillers #1. So this one, I think, is a really serious investment grade book, but it, fits on a cold list. You get a lot in this book for what you pay for. Certainly, if you grab it in the 9.8, you might want to consider this one in the raw. There's not a lot of 9.8s out there, but it's the first appearance of Lilith, who is the daughter of Dracula. I think that's really cool. Like, if you're a big vampire fan, this is definitely one to think about. And there's probably some underrated potential with Lilith as well. This one's just such a great collector item. So 19 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. 5.1% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8. So this is a 70s book, like 1974. So an older book, you'd expect probably a single digiter, but still really favorable. 5.1% of all graded copies in the blue label are 9.8. So there's only 19 of these out there. I wasn't seeing too many completed listings for the 9.8, unfortunately. But Go Collect has this one at 1,850. This is one I've noticed myself over the past 2 to 3 years. Occasionally one will pop up in an auction kind of thing. I think before the market really took off last year and the year before, right around $1,000, maybe a bit less for this one in the 9.8, a one of those 19. I think it's just an absolutely fantastic buy. The market's really hot right now. I think if one of these popped up in an auction from a popular seller, it would go over 2,000. I think 1,850 is totally worth it. So a pretty serious, expensive one, but a great one to consider if you're kind of a vampire fan, and one I've considered in the past and almost jumped on one in the past for sure. All right, next cold one here is an Avengers 682 in the second printing here. This one's still staying really affordable, I think. It's the first cameo appearance of Immortal Hulk. There's a debate out there, like maybe it's the first appearance. He really kind of comes in a few panels, and then at the end you see him and it says he's immortal, like in the print even. So, you see a lot of people argue that this one's pretty much the first appearance of Immortal Hulk. In this second printing, you get the cameo on the cover. So that's kind of cool. You hear a lot of people talk about how this one's likely much less printed than Avengers 684, probably. That's the most common, like, first appearance of Immortal Hulk when Hulk gets his immortal powers. But Avengers 682, I think, is a great cold option right now. This second printing has 94 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. 93.1% of all graded copies are 9.8, so not a relatively rare 9.8. That's why it's really cheap. So a couple of these I've sold. There was an auction, one sold for $56.05. Great price, I think. Definitely one where if you're patient in an auction, you get a really good price on some of these cold ones. Seen a few sell up to about $90. So this is one I've mentioned on like an affordable modern video. I think we did. I mentioned it once or twice on the channel. And you know what? Actually, about 3 days ago, I think it was, there was one in Canada, and I ended up buying one. Yeah, it was about $85. I haven't got it in yet, otherwise I would have brought it out. But so that'll be probably an unbox video in the next couple weeks. But this one's cool. I have two other, I have Avengers 684 9.8 and Immortal Hulk #1 9.8. So this just kind of really, kind of a great trio of Immortal Hulk keys that I have now. So yeah, look out for that unbox video coming. All right, next couple cold ones here. Swamp Thing #50. Yeah, this one's the first appearance of Justice League Dark, pretty much. Kind of like, John Constantine and the gang, pretty much. This is a great DC key to think about right now, that there's some underrated potential, for sure, I think, with Justice League Dark. So there's 105 CGC 9.8s of Swamp Thing 50. A great collector item, like a 1 of 105. If anything happens with Justice League Dark, as far as like maybe a movie or a show, which I think is more possible than people might think, it'll be a great to have one of these 105 of this one. 30.8% is the 9.8 ratio, so not too bad, for an 80s book. Nothing to really pay up for. So saw one sell for $224.95. Go Collect's got the fair value. I think it's a little bit under 200, but now I think it's kind of 225 to 250 for this one. Go Collect seems to be a bit behind. So again, I think some underrated potential for Swamp Thing 50. Let's get into, there's a bit of a debate out there. We'll have a look here at Swamp Thing 49. Cool cover on this one too. A debate where, you know, some people think 49 is the first appearance of Justice League Dark. So, you know, a lot of times they're both kind of cool covers, so it might be cool to get both. So I'll leave that up to you, to the one you want to decide. But for Swamp Thing 49, I think a great cold one to consider for a fair price. 73 9.8s in the blue label for 49 for issue 49. 36.3% the 9.8 percentage. And seeing a few of these, I saw one sell in an auction, like I think is a really good, pretty great price right now, $117.50. So I think that's a great price. If you kind of want it now, maybe $125, $130. I think I've even saw people kind of paying up to $150 for this one. These are, you know, pretty well followed DC key issues, but I think there's some underrated potential. Yeah, any pop culture thing with Justice League Dark, and these books are a lot more expensive. So yeah, I actually like these as great DC keys to buy right now. Next one here is an Iron Man number 118. First appearance of Jim Rhodes. Yeah. And so I think I've mentioned this in the past periodically on a few videos. This is just kind of a cool key issue to have, certainly first appearance of Jim Rhodes. But if they ever, you know, Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark, I don't think he's going to be Iron Man forever, certainly. So at some point, I think a good storyline could be to pass the Iron Man down in the MCU, Avengers movies or whatever, to a Jim Rhodes. Maybe like a young, cool actor type of Jim Rhodes. At some point, you know, I'm sure Downey Jr. will stick around for a bit longer, possibly. But I think it's a decent enough speculation. And this one's a great collector item in the 9.8. Absolutely. 92. CGC 9.8's in the blue label, a 1 in 92. So even if that doesn't happen, awesome collector item here that you can get for a pretty fair price for what you're getting in this book. 16.5% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8. It's not too bad at all. A decent investment grade ratio for this one. I think this is a 1979 book. Might be an 80s book. $615.73. I saw one sell for in an auction. This one heating up a little bit. The whole market's really heating up. This one was sort of $450 to $500, I always thought. Pretty tough one to find, but I'd see them occasionally. Sometimes even under that, like over a year ago, I would say. But $615.73, given where the market's gone, I still think this is decent value. And the upside's huge if Jim Rhodes ever kind of takes over for Tony Stark in the MCU. All right, next one here. A really cool modern. It's Guardians of the Galaxy number 1. This one just came out last year. It's the Comics Mint Virgin Edition I want to focus on here, with a really kind of cute, sexy Gamora cover that I think is really collectible. And I've talked in the past about how like sort of hot lady covers are a big niche in comic book collecting. And I think this one has a chance to be really collectible over time within that niche, certainly. Yeah, just a really hot, great cover by Shannon Mayer. Yeah, he's definitely got all the skills to do these kind of real-life portrait covers. So awesome. This Virgin Edition, though, 78 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. There's about the same amount of signature series, this being a modern book, so you might want to go that route. 95.1% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8, so kind of a typical modern, nothing rare in the 9.8. So the blue label Virgin Edition saw one sell for $69.99 and saw one sell for $89.95 it was. So that's kind of the range, I think, which, you know, if you're into these lady covers, I think this is one to target, and I think it'll be collected over time. And it's one I kind of want, to be honest, just out of the cuteness of the cover, pretty much. Yeah, she just looks great on this cover. So one to consider, and you know, makes sense around like $69.99 if you can get one of the Virgin Editions in the 9.8 looking awesome. I mean, that's making a lot of sense if you're into these lady covers. So next one here, speaking of vampires, I'll talk about here a Tomb of Dracula, number 1 in the CGC 9.8. This is a really big key issue that is a fantastic 9.8. And it's expensive, so, but it's for what you get, I think it still fits on a cold list if you can swing some of the prices we'll talk about. It is expensive. It is the first appearance of Dracula in comics. So good reason to be expensive. There's only 53 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. So certainly some of these you consider them in the raw and, you know, do your pricing research, get a good deal in the raw. But a 1 of 53 for first Dracula in the 9.8 is pretty tempting. Even better, 2.8% of all graded copies are 9.8. So this is a really tough one to find in the super high grade. This was one about a year ago. I got on a little sidetrack idea where I wanted to buy a Tomb of Dracula #1 in the 9.8. They were about 1,800, 2,000 or under was a good deal I was trying to find one for. Because a great 9.8 ratio, a 1/53, and Dracula he's so classic. It almost predates comic books, and certainly there were stories written of Dracula that certainly predate comic books, but his first comic book appearance I think is pretty special because Dracula is just so classic, beyond comic books, like just in literature. So I always thought to have one of the 53 with the super rare in the 9.8 was a great buy. So GoCollect's got it now at 3,400, and it's about a year and a half later from when I was getting those ideas to buy a Tomb of Dracula #1 for under 2,000. So it's done well. And I'd imagine there's some, pretty serious collectors out there that are kind of in that same mind frame as me that are thinking, first, Dracula is probably a great comic to get, and this one being so rare in this super high grade, it makes sense. In the 9.8, I think for 3,400 as a serious investment grade book, if you can swing that price, I think it's a buy right now, yeah. Okay, next one here, A Flaming Carrot #27. I touched on this one in, it was one of our recent videos of, I forget what it was, some speculative modern comics or something like that. But this is a Todd McFarlane Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cover. It's a Dark Horse comic. So a lot to like about this one. I think certainly if you like the eye appeal of the cover, I'm a little, even though it's a Todd cover, I remember seeing this one and kind of wanting to like it, but never really been compelled to buy it because I wasn't, really liking the eye appeal of the cover. But it's one to consider, and it's a cold one. It's a cool collector item. In the 9.8 definitely, but even in the raw, consider this one. I think you can get it for cheap if you're kind of on top of your searches. It's kind of a tough one to find in a high grade though. 15 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. Dark Horse comic, going to be lower printed than a Marvel or DC book. 53.6% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8s, so not any real special relative rarity in the 9.8. I wasn't seeing any 9.8 sell. Yeah, only 15 of them out there. Going to be really hard to find some sales prices. I saw 9.6 sell for $80. And I mentioned on the past video that I covered on this one that if a 9.8 sold, it would probably go for like 175 to 200 would be my guess. Maybe like 225 if someone wanted it, to get one of those 15. If someone wanted it a lot, around 225 maybe. But one to consider if you're a McFarlane fan and a Ninja Turtles fan, which I definitely am, and I kind of want this one, but just wish it was just maybe a cooler looking cover. Okay, next one's a very cool one. Spawn #50 in the CGC 9.8. This is a cool one. It's a cover homage of Spawn #1. And Spawn #50, in the 9.8, we'll look really quick on the census, only 42 CGC 9.8s, and certainly there's more out there, to be graded, but a 1 of 42 is great. 37.8% to 9.8 ratio. I think a good strategy with Spawn, maybe, is Spawn #1, you go with the newsstand version, the one that I always recommend, the more rare version of Spawn #1, and instead of buying Spawn #1 in the direct version, which there's like 1.6 million copies of them or whatever, you buy a Spawn 50 in the 9.8, a 1 of 42 CGC 9.8, I think is a better collector item than Spawn #1 in the direct edition. I think you go newsstand edition if you're going Spawn #1, just for that fact that there were so many printed, and then Image Comics don't have the newsstand distribution, so the newsstands in Spawn are pretty special. But Spawn 50 I think is a better collector item in the 9.8 than Spawn #1, the direct version. Seen a couple sell, $110 and $130. Yeah, I think that's the kind of range there. Maybe if you wait in an auction, you even get it closer to 100. This was one that you used to be able to get under 100, but I think Spawn's, a lot of these Spawn keys I've heated up a little bit. And 110 I think is completely fair if you want this one. And it's definitely worth considering, and a cold one at a fair price, absolutely. All right. Last one here on the cold list, a Batman, Vengeance of Bane in the CGC 9.8, one I do have, and I do talk about this one quite a lot, and it might be a bit of a stretch putting this one on the cold list, but, a lot of these are a bit underfollowed, so I just wanted to put a big key that I think is just a really good value right now. Yeah, it might not be cold, it actually is trending quite nicely, and even in the past couple weeks, it seems like a few are selling for kind of pretty high prices compared to the price history for this one, but first appearance, origin of Bane, a huge Batman villain. That's like one of the big iconic Batman villains that you can get a first appearance in the 9.8. So a 973 CGC 9.8's in the blue label. That's pretty good. A 1 of 973, especially for like an early 90s book. That's pretty good. 32.2% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8s. Not too bad at all. Could be a little bit better, but not too bad. So seeing a few sell. One went in an auction for $613, and I believe one even sold. It was like $649.99. If you go back about a month, they were sort of selling in that $550 area. That would have been a great buy, but I think it's still a great buy. Yeah, I think even though this one might not be cold, it might not, it is trending kind of a little bit heating up hot, but there's no I don't think there's going to be like a Bane movie or, Bane animated movie. Like there's no, real Bane rumors. So again, this is just a classic Batman key issue in the 9.8 that I think is worth its value right now. That auction that went for $613, that was from a really popular seller. Maybe you're patient on this one this year. You can still get it under 600. Maybe that 550 level is doable. And I think that's one of the better values. So yeah, I wanted to include it on the cold list, even though it is kind of trending and heating up pretty good. Batman, Vengeance of Bane, but for good reason. Yeah, just a great key issue, again, of a Batman villain. Big iconic Batman villain. Most of all the big iconic Batman villain first appearances are in the Silver Age and Golden Age, so you can't get him in the top grade. But Bane kind of passes the test as a big iconic Batman villain, and you can still get the 9.8. So it's a special book, and it's called Bane Special, right? All right, we'll leave it at that, team. So yeah, some cold ones to get through, and certainly I'm a big proponent always for going for the mega keys, not overthinking things and getting those big key issues, but a little bit of spice on your collection. I think these cold ones make so much sense, where you could just get a great deal. They're not going to cost you that much, and they give you a lot of pride of ownership, and a lot of the covers are cool, and then some of them have some potential, yeah, and they end up surprising you sometimes as well when you get a really good deal on a 9.8. Alrighty, we'll leave it at that though, team. Thanks so much for watching, as always, and I'll see you on the next one.